This is Gemara Menachos, Daf Tzadi Gimel, and we're holding on Tzadi Beis and Mid Beis, about 12 lines from the bottoms at the two dots, which we quote the next segment of the Mishnah, which is called Karbanais Hayachid. Te'unin Tzmicha, Chotz Mibachar Meiser Pesach. This is really the contrast of the first half of the Mishnah. First half of the Mishnah said, Karbanais Sibor do not require Smicha. Then the Mishnah says, but Avada, what does require Smicha? A Karban Yachid, except for three exceptions, Bachar, Meiser, and Pesach of a Karban Yachid do not require Smicha. Says the Gemara Tanur Rabbanon, says the Pasik, Karbanoi, his Karban. From here we learn how to play a Bachar, it's not your Karban. Why? Shiachal, I would think, Valotinu to Kalvachaimer, Mashlamim Shin Kedusha Son Mirachem. Shlamim is not born Kaddish, right? A Shlamim, you're Makdish. And yet, what's the halacha to Unin Smicha? Bechar Shekdusha Son Mirachem. A Bechar that's born with Kedusha, Din Sheton Smicha. Chayrat Shvi Pashit, that should yes have Smicha. Talmulay Ma'ar Karban, so we need a drasha, your Karban or his Karban, V'lei Bechar. Bechar is not something that you made into a Karban. A Bechar is something that was inherently a Karban. Continues the Gemara, Karban and V'lei Ma'aser, in a similar vein. This teaches us that Ma'aser doesn't need Smicha. Why do we need a pasuk? Sheyachav Aladinu, I would think, Umashlamim. Shein Mekach, the name Lachareyem. Shlamim has no kedusha before or after, and yet teunin smicha. Meiser shemekadish alfanav lacharav eino did shetan smicha. Meiser which has kedusha before and afterwards. What does that mean? What it means is if someone by mistake is mekadesh animal number 9, if someone is mekadesh animal number 11, it gets kedusha. Therefore, if she has to have smicha. Talmud Leimar, 4 lines on the bottom, Karban Ayvulei Meiser. And Drasha number 3, Karban Ayvulei Pesach. Why? Shiachlai with Ingvalodinuma. Shlamim Sheinai Ba'amud V'Habam. A third characteristic of the Shlamim, contrast to the Pesach. When it comes to the Shlamim, there's no halacha of stand up and bring it. And yet on Smicha Pesach, there is this unique halacha that watch you have to get up and bring it. Eino dinjat on Smicha Tamalemer Karbanoi Veloi Pesach. So 3 drashas all learned in the regard that it's only your Karban and not a Bechar Meiser and Pesach. Just to mention, what's this last drasha of Amoid V'Havei? That's the Elasha, that's the terminology connoting that each and every person has to bring it. You have a chiyuv, get up and bring your Karban Pesach, which of course does not apply by Karban Shlamim. Says the Gemara, Ikal Mifrach. We can ask the following kasha. Ma Shlamim. How can you ask from a Shlamim? How can you, learn from a Shlamim? Shekein on the last line, to unin nesachem, utinufas chaz v'shaik. When it comes to a Shlamim, there's a din, there's libations, there's a din tenufa, the waving of the chaz v'shaik. Whereas Bechar, Meiser, and Pesach do not have this din. And therefore, if it does not have this din, says the Gemara, what's the hava mina to learn from it? Says the Gemara, you're right. Kraya smachta ba'alma. The psukim are merely a smachta, but you're right, you don't really need a pasuk because you couldn't really learn the Kavachaimer in the first place. Ask the Gemara, Ella Krai Lamali. So why do I need the psukim? Krai Lamali. Why do I need the psukim? Says the Gemara. Karbanai v'loy karban chavir. Meaning, if we're saying that the pasuk of Karbanai is a mere smachta, that means you don't really need it. So says the Gemara, so what do we really need the pasuk for? What do we do with this pasuk of Karbanai for real? What does it come to teach us? Says the Gemara, you know what it comes to teach us? It comes to teach us Karbanai and not Karban Chaverai, meaning Karbanai requires Smicha, Not carbon chaveroi. Karbanai v'lei carbanakum. Karbanai l'rabbi is called balei carbon l'smicha. Every private, personal yachadik carbon requires smicha. Continues the Gemara, quoting the last part of the Mishnah. Hayayri Seimich. The Mishnah ended with a line that Yayri, someone who's inherits something from a parent, father died after being makdash a karban. The Yayrish does smicha. He brings nisachem and then he does timura. Says the Gemara Tani Rav Chananya Kamei Rava. Rav Chananya Kamei Rava learns Yayrish Einay Seimich. Yayrish Einay Meimar, arguing on the Mishnah. Yerish has no din of smicha and has no din of temura. What about our Mishnah? Frak Gemara Vanan Tanan, but we learned that Yerish is Yasaimech and Umedi Anisachav, Umeimar, and then he affects temura. Amar Lei, so he responds to Rava, you're right. Should I switch it around? Should I switch the wordage of the Brisa and then it will parallel perfectly the words of the Mishnah? Amar Le responds Rava Lohi. Masti Salmani Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Mishnah is in odds with Rav Chananya. Why? Because the Mishnah sheet has Rabbi Yehuda. Titania, we learned in a Brisa. Yeresh Seimech, Yeresh Meimar, Rav Yehuda Imer, Yeresh Ena Seimech, Yeresh Einai Meimar. So says the Gemara, I said it backwards. When it says Masnis and Mani, it's referring to the Brisa. The Brisa is Rabbi Yehuda, but the Tanakama argues, which is going to be our Mishnah. So says the Gemara, so where do all these dinim come from? My taima to Rabbi Yehuda. Where's Rabbi Yehuda coming from? Karbanoi, he darshins like carbon aleph. Aviv, not its father's carbon. And not his father's carbon. V'yoliv tchilas hektish, misayv hektish. And we're going to learn out the halacha is at the beginning of hektish from Seif Hektish, meaning Ma Seif Hektish, just like at the end of the story with this Yarish. Yarish is a Seimech. At Chilas Hektish, Yarish in a Meimar, Yarish is not able to affect Temura. The Rabbanan. And the Rabbanan that argue, the Rabbanan who is our Mishnah, what do they hold? The Rabbanan hold Hamer Yaimer, the Rabbis is a Yarish. And then once we have a special reboy saying that is yet Temura by a Yarish, we can now flip it around. V'yoliv Seif Hektish, we learn out the end of Hektish from what? Mitchilas Hektish. Matchilas Hektish Yerish Meimar. Seif Hektish Yerish Seimech. So that is going to be the Machlekes Rabbanan and Rabbi Yehuda. And now in classical Gemara ping pong, what does the Rabbanan do with Rabbi Yehuda's pasuk? What does Rabbi Yehuda do with the Rabbanan's pasuk? Rabbanan, hi Karbanai Mayavdile. Karbanai, v'loi karbanakum, Karbanai, v'loi karban chaveroi, Karbanai. The rabbis call Bali Karban l'smicha, as we saw at the top of the Amud, that the din of smicha can be learned out from this pasuk. Rabbi Yehuda, what does he say? The rabbis call Bali Karban l'smicha, Leslie doesn't need that drasha. Inami, islay akum v'chaveroi michad kranafka. Or you can learn out the same way you don't do smicha on an akum, Zdika carbon, you also do smicha on your friend's carbon. And then, if that were to be true, Israel Trey Cry, then we have an extra pasuk. Chad carbon, naivel carbon ava, vidach l'rabbis kobali carbon le'smicha. Because once you learn out both from one pasuk, you have the extra pasuk. Rabbi Yehuda, what does Rabbi Yehuda do with the pasuk of the Chachamim? Says the Gemara Mivayla the rabbis, Eso Isha. Anaya halacha, says Rabbi Yehuda. Titani learned in a Raisa. The entire parsha over here is speaking Lashon Zachar. Ma Saifinu the rabbis, Eso Isha. So how do we lemaisa be marba a woman that a woman could have a din of Tamura? Halachas that we'll learn extensively in Maseches Tamura coming up. Tamalei Mar Hamer Yemer Rabbanan Darshi Me Ve'im Rav Yehuda Ve'im Loi Darshi. We continue with the Mishnah. The Mishnah on the bottom of Sadi Gimel Amud Aleph, continuing the halachas of smicha, says the Mishnah Kol Saimchim. Everyone performs smicha chaz mechere shaita vekatan vesuma viyakum ve'eved v'ashliach ve'oisha. All these people do not do smicha. Smicha shiyarei mitzvah. Smicha is shirayim of the mitzvah, which means, as we've seen many times, of the din of shirayim, it's an auxiliary part of the mitzvah, excuse me. Meaning, if you don't do it, lamaisa, it's not ma'akiv. Al roish, how do you do smicha on the head? B'shtei yadayim, b'makish haseimcha, and the place that you do the smicha sheichetin is is where you do the shchita. V'tekev l'smicha shchita. Right next to the smicha is where you're going to do shchita. Now, what does it mean on the makayim shesaimchen yeshechtin? It says it's on the head. We know smicha is on the neck, as we pointed to. So Rashi over here points out what it means is, so Rashi in Ksaviyat over here, it means in the location, not in the place on the animal. It means in the same geographical location that you don't move the animal from that area that it was, that you did the smicha on it. And with that, we could begin the Gemara. Bishlama. Excuse me. The first part of the Mishnah, we started at Kol Saimchin Chutz from the classical list. Says the Gemara. So there's no smichas lavini deininu. Okay, they don't have any das. Akam nami. There's no din smicha. Why? Bnei Yisrael seimcha v'in akam seimcha. Bnei Yisrael do smicha and not an akam. Elasuma. My time aloi. What's the reason? There's no smicha for a suma. Rav Chisda Rav Yitzchak Bar Abdimi. 4 lines from the bottom. Chad Amar. We learned it out from Asya Smicha Meziknei Aida. We learn out smicha from the zikinim, from the elders. Chad Amar Asya Smicha Me'olas Re'iyah. We learn out from Olas Re'ila. So either we learn it out from the fact that just like you can be part of Sanhedrin if you're blind, so too the halacha of smicha is said in conjunction with the Sanhedrin, and therefore it's going to be Memayet, anyone that's blind. Or we learn it out from Olas Re'iyah that what, as the Bana Rashi over here spells out, that the Olas Re'iyah is a carbon that requires smicha, and over there we also have a special miyot of someone who is blind. Why? Because they are not bar re'iyah, so Olas Re'iyah, to see the Beis HaMikdash, and they can't see the Beis HaMikdash. Says the Gemara on the last line, Olas Re'iyah, my time le'alif, Minzik ne'a'eda. Why does it need she to learn like the other one? And we turn over to Sadi Gimel Amud Beis. Says the Gemara, you know why? Because Dani Yachad Miyachad. I'd rather learn from a singular person. Being Dani Yachad Mei Tzibor. Ulman the Amar Yom Zignei the Maitan Yolam Yolas Riya the Fakir Tekasha. Done immediately Chsev Beisimicha Begufei. Immediately Beisimicha Begufei. Lafuki Yolas Riya the Gufa Meolas the Dava Gemara. Says the Gemara, by the Yolas Riya it's going to be a 2-step drasha. Therefore, that Mandamer holds you rather not learn it out from, because Olas Re'iyah is learning from the Ilas Nidava, and therefore it's 1 step removed. What's the drasha? Vayikrav is Oila v'yaseh kamishpat. Kimishvat Oilas Nidava limit Oilas Chayva Shatunin Smicha, and therefore causes learn from something else. It's 1 step removed. He rather learns directly from the Ziknei Oida. We continue 10 lines down with the list that the Mishnah quoted of those that don't do smicha. Eved v'ashliach v'yisha. Tanu Rabbanan, where do we learn this out from? Says the Torah Yad Toi, the smicha is done with his hand. V'lo Yad Avdoi, at the hand of his Eved. Yad Toi, v'lo Yad Shluchai. Yad Toi, v'lo Yad Ishtoi. Says the Gemara, Kol Hani Lamali. Why do we need to have all these mi'utim? Why can't we learn them all out from one time? The Torah says, the one mechad yadai we should learn it out from. Says the Gemara at Shvicha. Ikasiv rachmana chad hava min alamutei eved tala bar mitzvahs. Avashich bar mitzvah su shluch shaladim kamaisai. I would think emalisbach listed of smicha. Viash vidhani tarti if it said it by these two, said it by an eved and by a shliach. I would think lav kigufei dami aval ishtai took kigufei dami. I would think this yadin of smicha. Smicha, that's what the Torah had to write the word yadai 3 times. We continue by quoting the next part of the Mishnah that taught us that what is smicha shiarei mitzvah? It's not an ikar, it's shirayim, it's auxiliary. And we said over Rashi that if you miss it, carbon still kosher. Tanu Rabbanan, we learn this out from V'samach v'nirtza. Chismicha b'chaperes. Really, is the smicha of v'nirtza and it's pleasing? Is the smicha that which gives the kapara v'lin kapara el b'dam shenemar kedam u'benefesh yechaper alalay melachas? What does the Torah mean? V'samach v'nirtza. You know what it teaches us? Shemasal smicha shiari mitzvah. That if you make the smicha into the shiari mitzvah, not the actual mitzvah, meaning if you make it to the shiurayim, you do it, but it's an extra bonus. Malav akas of kilo like kiber. Then it's as if you didn't do it in the right way, but the kiber, but you do get a carbon. I don't think I said this right. Let's say it again. Shemasal l'shiyari mitzvah, meaning, and you didn't do it. That's what I said wrong. Excuse me. You made it to shirayim. What are shirayim? You said, that's smicha thing. I don't need it. So you didn't actually do it. Says the Torah of V'samach v'nirtza, malav akaza kila chiber balamaisa. You're still going to get your kapara. Vitanya says the Gemara, if this drasha sounds far-fetched, I'll show you a marmakai. We learned similarly gabi tenufa the waving ki agavna. Le tenufa lechaber, says the Torah. Tenufa mechaberes le kapara ela bedam mamish the same drasha. Shene'amar ki adamu nefesh. So why does the Torah say le tenufa lechaber eloim lecha shemasa le tenufa shari mitzvah? If you didn't do the tenufa malav akasav ki lechiber balamaisa, you're going to get the kapara just like if you didn't do the smicha. And we continue by quoting the makaim of the smicha is al haraish. Says the Gemara, smack in the middle of the first word on the line is al haraish. Tanu Rabbanan, Yadai, al haraish. You lean the hands on the head. V'lo yadai al tzavar, but not on the neck. Yadai al haraish. V'lo yadai al gabayim, not on the back. Yadai al haraish. Lo yadai al chazen, on the breast. Says Gemara Kalani Lamali, why do we need all these miyutim? I would have thought, okay, to exclude the neck makes sense. Why? Because it's not equal with the head. Aval gaboy, the back is on the same plane. The koiladi roishai emaloi. Tzvichaviyash minani tarti that in the back. The neck and the back. Misham delay yisrabu letenufa. Those not marbe letenufa. Aval chazav, the breast has its own maila that what? Yisrabu letenufa emaloi. Tzvichas, we need all 3 miyutim. So yibayilu frakti yomara yada yalat stadim. What if someone puts his hands on the sides of the animal's head? Mau. Tashma de Tanya, by Birabber of Lazbin Yaakov, Oimer, Yadel Reish, Yadel, let's study him. By Rav Yirmiyah. Matlis Mau. What if you place your hands on a matlis, or you wrapped your hands with a cloth, and then you did the smicha, shetachutz, that there is a chatzitza, so it's not going to work. We continue quoting the end of the Mishnah, which taught us you do smicha b'roish, and with what? B'shtei yodayim. Minani mili. From where do we know this? Amar Reish Lakish. Tamar Kravas Amar Arnes Shtei Yodav. Aaron rested his 2 hands. Ksev yadai, uksev shtei. Yadai is singular, but shtei is plural. Zebanav kol makish never yadoi harikan shtayim. Achbar l'chad kosav achas, unless the Torah explicates specifically one. Azar Rav Elazar Amar La Shemaita Bebei Midrash. Rav Elazar went over and said this teaching in the base Medrash. V'lamar Shvei the Reish Lakish. He didn't say the name Reish Lakish. Shama Reish Lakish v'ikvid. He got upset. Oisiv lei, he said to Rav Elazar, Isal gadet gleichel t'chsev yadai, tartininu, lamli lemichtav yadav. If you're right, so why would it say ever yadav with a yod, yadav with a yod? Ikshulei, Esrim v'arba yadav, Reish Lakish, which again, remember, this is really Reish Lakish's memra, but it was said not b'shmai, and he went and he frecked and he asked 24 kashas, 24 times. You find Yadav in the Torah. Yadav Tiviana, Yadav Ravloi, Shakales Yad, Sikales Yadav. All these different cases. Ishtik. Rav Elazar was quiet. Lebasar de nachtaite. After Reish Lakish calmed down, Amar Le, Rav Elazar said to him, Reish Lakish said to Rav Elazar, My temalo temali Yadav Dismicha. My temaloi temali. What is it you didn't tell me? Yadav Dismicha. Ka'amri. I'm talking about Yadav only with regard to Smicha, and I'm busy asking Kasha of Kol Torah Kula. This answers Rav Elazar b'Smicha Namik Sevi Yadav. We have a similar Kasha from Smicha Love Vayisaveu. Smicha Debeima Ka'amri. Says Reish Lakish, no, it's not a Kasha. Because Yadav by Behema, we don't find such a Zach. So Reish Lakish didn't know it was his memra. He asked all these kashas. Then he calmed down and he said it's Gevaldik. And finally, Makish Sheichtin, take of Shchita. My Kamar, Hachi Kamar. But Makish Sheichtin should think of Shchita. That you want to do it in the same place. Why? Because take of Shchita. Picking it from here, B'siyata Tishmaya.